The Valthrix hegemony had ruled the Orion Spur for more than 10,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever dared to challenge them. They were giants among the stars, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with scales that shimmered like dark metal and eyes that glowed with ancient cruelty. Their warships numbered in the thousands, and their armies had crushed every civilization foolish enough to resist them. The Valthrix did not negotiate, did not compromise, and did not show mercy. They took what they wanted, and they destroyed anything that stood in their way. When their scientists needed to test a new orbital bombardment weapon, they chose a small human colony called New Geneva in the Kepler system. The humans had been in space for only 300 years, a mere heartbeat compared to the Valthrix. They had no great fleets, no powerful weapons, and no allies of consequence. To the Valthrix High Command, they were nothing more than insects, useful only as targets for weapons testing. The bombardment lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ended, 43,217 human beings were dead. Entire families had been vaporized in an instant. Schools full of children had become ash. Hospitals, farms, homes, and dreams, all of it reduced to smoking craters on a world that had once been full of hope. The Valthrix generals reviewed the weapon data and declared the test a success. They filed their reports, collected their medals, and never gave the dead humans another thought. Why would they? The humans were primitives, barely worth noticing. There would be no consequences, no retaliation, no response of any kind. That was what the Valthrix believed with absolute certainty. They were wrong. 3 standard months after the New Geneva massacre, a small vessel appeared at the edge of Valthrix space. It was a human ship, unremarkable in every way. No weapons were visible on its hull. No escort fleet accompanied it. It simply drifted toward the hegemony's capital world of Threxis Prime, broadcasting a single message on all frequencies. This is the diplomatic vessel Remembrance, representing the human confederacy. We request an audience with the Valthrix High Conclave to discuss matters of grave importance. The message caused great amusement among the Valthrix military commanders. They had expected the humans to hide, to flee, to cower in fear after witnessing the power of the hegemony. Instead, this tiny ship had come directly to their doorstep, asking to talk. How delightful. How entertaining. Supreme Hierarch Korvax the Undying, ruler of the Valthrix hegemony, received news of the human vessel while feasting in his palace. He was ancient beyond measure, having ruled for more than 2,000 years through a combination of brutal cunning and advanced life extension technology. His scales had turned silver with age, and his eyes burned with the cold fire of a being who had seen empires rise and fall. A human ship, he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Coming here? After what we did to their colony. His advisors laughed nervously. They must be coming to surrender, Supreme One. Perhaps they wished to beg for mercy. Korvax considered this for a moment. A cruel smile spread across his reptilian face. Yes, that must be it. The primitives have realized their place in the universe. They come to kneel before their betters. He waved one massive clawed hand. Grant them their audience. Let them enter the Chamber of Conquerors. I want the entire conclave present to witness the humans grovel. It will be most amusing. And so the human vessel was allowed to land on Threxis Prime, the heart of the most powerful empire in the known galaxy. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped off the ship alone. She was not what the Valthrix expected. They had imagined human diplomats would be large and aggressive, perhaps military officers in elaborate uniforms. Instead, they saw a woman of middle age, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a simple style. She wore a plain black suit with no medals, no decorations, and no visible weapons. Her face was calm, almost serene, and her brown eyes held a quiet intensity It made several guards uncomfortable without understanding why. She carried only a small data chip in her pocket. The Velthrix escort surrounded her, towering over her small frame. They led her through the streets of the capital, past monuments celebrating Velthrix victories and statues of great conquerors. They wanted her to feel small, to feel afraid, to understand the hopelessness of her situation. Elena Vasquez walked among them without fear. She had been chosen for this mission from among thousands of candidates. She had spent her entire career preparing for moments like this. She had studied the Velthrix for decades, learning their culture, their weaknesses, their psychology. She knew exactly what they expected from her, and she knew exactly how to surprise them. As she walked, she thought about New Geneva. She thought about the 43,000 people who had died there. She had memorized every name, every face, every story. She carried them with her like stones in her heart, heavy and cold and impossible to forget. Her sister had lived on New Geneva. Her niece and nephew had lived there too. They were among the dead now, reduced to nothing by Velthrix weapons. Elena had received the news while sitting at her desk on Earth, reading a routine briefing. One moment she had a family, and the next moment they were gone. Just like that. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. No reason at all except that the Velthrix had needed something to shoot at. She had not cried. She had not screamed. She had simply sat very still for a long time, and when she finally moved again, something inside her had changed forever. Now she walked through the enemy capital with that change burning quietly in her chest. The escort led her to the Chamber of Conquerors, a massive hall at the center of the Imperial Palace. The doors were 20 meters tall, made of black metal carved with scenes of Velthrix triumph. They swung open before her, revealing a space designed to intimidate. The chamber was vast beyond reason, large enough to hold a small city. The walls were lined with trophies from every species the Velthrix had conquered: skulls, weapons, flags, sacred objects, and artifacts of civilizations that no longer existed. Each trophy was mounted with a small plaque describing how the Velthrix had defeated its former owners. There were thousands upon thousands of trophies, reaching up into the darkness above. At the far end of the chamber, 12 massive thrones rose on a raised platform. Each throne held a Velthrix hierarch, the rulers of the great houses that controlled the hegemony. And at the center, on a throne larger and more ornate than all the others, sat Supreme Hierarch Korvax the Undying. He looked down at the small human woman standing alone on the vast floor, and he smiled his cruel smile. "Welcome, little creature," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "We are honored by your visit. Please, tell us why you have come so far to see us." Elena Vasquez looked up at him, and she did not smile. "I have come," she said, "to speak about what you did to New Geneva." And in that moment, though none of the Velthrix understood it yet, everything began to change. The 12 hierarchs of the Velthrix hegemony stared down at the small human woman, and they felt nothing but contempt. She was so tiny, so fragile, so utterly insignificant compared to their massive forms. How could such a creature possibly think she had the right to stand in the Chamber of Conquerors? How could she walk among the trophies of 1,000 defeated civilizations and not tremble with fear? It was absurd. It was laughable. It was an insult to the glory of the Velthrix. Supreme Hierarch Korvax leaned forward on his throne, his ancient eyes studying the human with cold amusement. He had seen countless diplomats from countless species stand in this very chamber, and they had all reacted the same way. They begged. They pleaded. They offered tribute and slaves and resources in exchange for mercy. Some had collapsed to their knees the moment they entered, unable to bear the weight of Velthrix power. But this human woman simply stood there, looking up at him with those strange brown eyes. "New Geneva," Korvax repeated, letting the name roll off his forked tongue. Ah yes, the colony in the Kepler system. I remember it now. We tested a new weapon there. The results were quite satisfactory. Several hierarchs chuckled at this, their laughter echoing through the vast chamber. Elena Vasquez did not react. Her face remained calm, her posture unchanged. 43,217 people died in that test, she said, her voice clear and steady. Men, women, and children. Families who had done nothing wrong. Scientists working to expand human knowledge. Farmers growing food to feed their neighbors. They had no weapons, no defenses, no way to fight back. And you killed them all. Hierarch Threxus, a particularly cruel member of the conclave, waved one massive claw dismissively. They were in our territory, he said. Everything within our borders belongs to us. We may do as we wish with our property. They were not your property, Elena replied. They were human beings. Human beings, another hierarch sneered. And what are human beings to the Velthrix? Your species has existed for the blink of an eye. You have no great fleets, no powerful weapons, no empire worthy of the name. You are insects, annoying little creatures that we crush beneath our feet without a second thought. The chamber filled with laughter again. Elena waited for it to stop. She did not argue, did not interrupt, did not show any sign of anger or fear. She simply waited, patient as stone, until the hierarchs fell silent. Is that what you think we are? She asked quietly. Insects? Korvax spread his arms wide, gesturing to the trophy-covered walls around them. Look around you, little human. These are the remains of species that thought themselves powerful. The Kethrani believed their psychic abilities made them invincible. Their skulls now decorate my throne room. The Vorthan Empire once controlled 200 worlds. Now they serve as slaves in our minds. The Luminex Collective thought their technology could protect them. We burned their home world to ash. He pointed one claw directly at Elena. Every civilization that has challenged the Velthrix has been destroyed. Every single one. And you, a primitive species that has barely learned to travel between stars, think you can stand before us and demand anything? I am not here to demand anything, Elena said. This surprised the hierarchs. They exchanged confused glances. Then why are you here? Korvax asked, genuine curiosity entering his voice for the first time. If not to beg, if not to demand, then what possible purpose could this meeting serve? Elena took a single step forward. It was a small movement, but something about it made several guards reach for their weapons. I am here to inform you, she said, to tell you something that you need to understand. And what is that? You assaulted our home. The words hung in the air, simple and direct. Korvax laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty in the sound. Your home? That colony was thousands of light years from your birth world. It was a tiny settlement of no importance. You misunderstand, Elena said. Anywhere humans live becomes our home. Every world we settle, every station we build, every place where human children are born and human dreams take root, those are all our home. New Geneva was our home, and you assaulted it. Hierarch Threxus rose from his throne, fury twisting his scaled face. Is this a threat, creature? Do you dare to threaten the Velthrix hegemony? I am stating a fact, Elena replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. Among humans, there is an ancient saying, a man's home is his castle. It means that we will defend the places we love with everything we have. We will fight to the last breath, the last drop of blood, the last ember of hope. You can destroy our bodies, but you cannot break our will to protect what is ours. Pretty words, Korvax said. But words mean nothing without power. And you have no power. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out the small data chip. Every guard in the chamber immediately aimed their weapons at her, but she made no threatening moves. She simply held the chip up for all to see. This contains information that the Human Confederacy wishes to share with the Velthrix hegemony, she said. I request permission to display it. Korvax hesitated. What game was this human playing? She had no weapons, no fleet, no leverage of any kind. And yet she stood there with absolute confidence, as if she knew something he did not. It was that confidence that worried him. For 2,000 years, Korvax had ruled through fear and power. He had learned to read his enemies, to sense weakness and strength. And something about this small human woman told him that she was not bluffing, that she truly believed she had some advantage he could not see. But what advantage could a primitive species possibly have against the Velthrix? Very well, he said at last. Show us your information. Let us see what the humans consider so important. Elena walked to the central pedestal in the chamber, where visiting dignitaries could display presentations. She inserted the chip, and the air above the pedestal shimmered with holographic light. An image appeared, a small blue planet, third from an ordinary yellow sun. This is Earth, Elena said, the birth world of humanity. We evolved there over millions of years, developing intelligence, language, and eventually technology. 200 years ago, we discovered faster than light travel and began spreading to the stars. The image shifted, showing human colonies appearing across a map of local space. But what you may not know, Elena continued, is that humans have been watching the galaxy for much longer than we have been traveling through it. We detected signs of advanced civilization centuries before we built our first starship. We studied them from afar, learning everything we could about the universe we were about to enter. The image changed again, showing the Velthrix hegemony, its borders, its military bases, its conquered territories. We watched you, Elena said, her voice dropping to something almost like a whisper. We watched you conquer and destroy. We watched you enslave and murder. We watched you build an empire on the bones of innocent species. And we prepared. The hierarchs shifted uneasily on their thrones. What was she saying? Prepared? Korvax asked. Prepared for what? Elena looked up at him, and for the first time, something cold and hard appeared in her brown eyes. For the day when someone like you would make the mistake of attacking our home. The holographic display above the pedestal changed once more, and what it revealed made every hierarch in the chamber fall completely silent. Hidden throughout the Orion Spur, in places the Velthrix had never thought to look, were weapons. Thousands upon thousands of weapons. Defense platforms hidden in asteroid fields. Missile batteries buried beneath the surfaces of dead moons. Stealth ships waiting in the darkness between stars. And behind all of these defenses, protected and preserved, was a fleet of warships unlike anything the Velthrix had ever seen. The ships were not large nothing compared to the massive dreadnoughts of the hegemony. But their designs were strange and unsettling, built with technology that did not match anything in Velthrix databases. They looked fast, deadly, and dangerous in ways that were difficult to define. What is this? Hierarch Threxus demanded, rising from his throne. What trick is this? No trick, Elena said calmly. This is the true military capability of the Human Confederacy. What you see here represents 200 years of preparation, research, and development. While your scouts observed our colony worlds and reported that we were a primitive species with minimal defenses, we were building something else entirely in secret. Korvax stared at the display, his ancient mind struggling to accept what he was seeing. Impossible! Our intelligence services have monitored human space for decades. We would have detected military preparations of this scale. Would you? Elena asked. Your intelligence services look for the same things every species builds. Large shipyards, obvious weapons factories, concentrated military bases. Those are easy to find, because that is how every other civilization in the galaxy has organized its defenses. But humans are different. She gestured to the display. We learned very early that we could not match the Veilthrix in direct strength. Your empire has existed for 10,000 years. You have resources, technology, and experience that we could not hope to equal. So we did not try. Instead, we developed a different approach. The hologram zoomed in on one sector of space, revealing a network of hidden facilities. Our weapons are dispersed, hidden, and autonomous. They do not require large crews or visible infrastructure. They wait in silence, drawing power from the stars themselves, ready to activate at a moment's notice. Your scouts flew past them 100 times without ever detecting their presence. Korvax felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. He had conquered 1,000 worlds by understanding his enemies, by knowing their strengths and weaknesses better than they knew themselves. But this human woman was describing something completely outside his experience. Even if this is true, he said slowly, it changes nothing. The Veilthrix hegemony commands the largest military force in the galaxy. We have crushed civilizations far more advanced than yours. These hidden weapons might slow us down, but they cannot stop us. Elena nodded, as if she had expected this response. You are correct, Supreme Hierarch. In a direct military conflict, the Veilthrix would eventually win. Our hidden defenses would hurt you badly, far more badly than you imagine. But in the end, your numbers and resources would prevail. Then what is the point of this display? Threxus demanded. Are you trying to frighten us? No, Elena said. I am trying to inform you of the choice that lies before you. She touched the pedestal, and the display changed again. Now it showed something even more surprising. Diplomatic communications. Hundreds of them, flowing between the human confederacy and other powers throughout the galaxy. For the past 3 months, Elena explained, while you assumed we were hiding in fear, human diplomats have been very busy. We have made contact with every major civilization in this region of space. We have shared information about Veilthrix activities, including detailed evidence of illegal weapons testing, violations of the Galactic Compact, and the unprovoked massacre of civilian populations. The hierarchs exchanged alarmed glances. The Galactic Compact was an ancient agreement that governed relations between spacefaring civilizations. It prohibited attacks on civilian populations, restricted certain types of weapons, and established basic rules for interstellar conduct. The Veilthrix had been violating it for centuries, but they had always done so quietly, carefully hiding the evidence. You have no proof. Hierarch Corvin snarled. These accusations are lies. We have extensive proof, Elena replied. Our intelligence services have been gathering evidence for decades. Every massacre, every illegal weapon, every secret prison and slave camp, we have documented all of it. And that documentation is now in the hands of every significant power in the Orion Spur. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The Cathari Federation has already frozen all trade agreements with the hegemony. The Luminari Collective has closed their borders to Veilthrix vessels. The Council of Neutral Worlds has called an emergency session to discuss sanctions and possible military action. Even the merchant guilds, who care only about profit, have begun refusing Veilthrix contracts. Korvax rose from his throne, his massive form trembling with rage. You dare to turn the galaxy against us? You insignificant little. I dare, Elena interrupted, her voice cutting through his anger like a blade. Because you gave me no choice. You killed 43,000 of my people. You murdered my sister, my niece, my nephew. You turned a peaceful colony into a graveyard for the sake of a weapons test. And you expected no consequences. You expected us to simply accept it. She took another step forward, and now her voice rose with a power that filled the vast chamber. The human confederacy does not accept the murder of our people. We do not bow to those who slaughter our children. We do not forget, we do not forgive, and we do not surrender. The chamber was absolutely silent. Elena reached into her pocket and produced a second data chip. This chip contains an official declaration from the Human Confederacy. As of this moment, a state of war exists between humanity and the Velthrix hegemony. War, Korvax laughed, but the sound was hollow. You have already admitted that you cannot defeat us. We cannot conquer you, Elena corrected. There is a difference. We do not want your territory, your resources, or your power. We want only one thing: justice for New Geneva. And we will have it. She placed the chip on the pedestal. This declaration includes specific terms. The Velthrix hegemony has 30 standard days to withdraw all military forces from every system, within 50 light years of human-claimed space. You will pay reparations to the families of those killed at New Geneva, and the officers responsible for ordering the attack will be turned over to human authorities to face trial. Absolutely not. Threxus roared. We will never submit to the demands of primitives. Then the war continues, Elena said simply. And with each day that passes, the hidden weapons of the Human Confederacy will activate. Your supply lines will be cut. Your communications will be disrupted. Your colonies will be isolated. We will not destroy your worlds. We are not murderers like you. But we will make it impossible for your empire to function. She turned to leave, then paused at the edge of the chamber. One final thing, she said. The ship I arrived on is not unarmed. It carries a dead man's switch connected to every hidden weapon in this system. If I do not return safely to that ship within 2 hours, those weapons will activate simultaneously. She looked back at Korvax, and her eyes were cold as the void between stars. You have 30 days. Use them wisely. And with that, Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked out of the Chamber of Conquerors, leaving the most powerful empire in the galaxy in stunned silence. The doors of the Chamber of Conquerors closed behind Ambassador Vasquez, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The 12 hierarchs sat frozen on their thrones, their ancient minds struggling to process what had just happened. A single human woman had walked into the heart of their power and delivered an ultimatum. She had threatened war against the mightiest empire in the galaxy, and she had done it without fear, without hesitation, and without any sign of doubt. It was impossible. It was absurd. It was an insult to everything the Velthrix represented. And yet, something about it rang true. Supreme Hierarch Korvax was the first to recover. He turned to his military advisor, a scarred old warrior named Thrikos, who had commanded fleets for 5 centuries. Is it possible? Korvax demanded. Could the humans have hidden such weapons from us? Thrikos studied the holographic data still floating above the pedestal. His scaled face was troubled. The technology she described is not impossible, Supreme One. We have always assumed that hiding military assets requires large infrastructure power plants, maintenance facilities, command centers. But if the humans developed autonomous weapons that could sustain themselves indefinitely, that would require power sources we have never seen, Hierarch Corvin interrupted. Energy systems that do not degrade over decades of dormancy. It is beyond anything in our databases. Perhaps, Thrikos admitted. But the humans are strange creatures. They come from a harsh world where survival required constant adaptation. Our scientists have studied their history, and it is filled with examples of impossible innovations. They split the atom before they could leave their own planet. They send messages across their world using invisible waves. They created machines that think. He shook his massive head. We assumed they were primitives because they were young. But youth does not always mean weakness. Sometimes it means creativity, flexibility, the willingness to try approaches that older civilizations would never consider. Korvax turned to his intelligence chief, a thin and calculating Valthrix named Sithax. What do our spies report? Have we seen any sign of these hidden weapons? Sithax's silence was answer enough. We have not, he finally admitted. But that proves nothing. The human woman claimed their weapons are designed to be undetectable. If she is telling the truth, we would not have found them. If she is lying, we also would not have found them. There is no way to know for certain without searching every asteroid field, every dead moon, every dark corner of space within their territory. Then search. Korvax commanded. Send every scout ship we have. I want those weapons found. That will take months, Sithax warned. Perhaps years. Human space is vast, and if the weapons are truly hidden, I do not care how long it takes. Find them. But even as he gave the order, Korvax knew it might already be too late. The human woman had not just threatened military action, she had described a diplomatic catastrophe that was already unfolding. As if to confirm his fears, a communications officer rushed into the chamber. Supreme Hierarch, we are receiving urgent messages from across the sector. The reports were devastating. The Gathari Federation, long a reluctant trading partner of the hegemony, had not merely frozen their agreements, they had severed diplomatic relations entirely. Their ambassador had left Thyrexis Prime within an hour of the human announcement, taking with him 3 centuries of carefully negotiated treaties. The Luminari Collective had closed their borders and begun mobilizing their defense forces. They claimed it was merely a precaution, but their warships were moving toward Velthrix space for the first time in living memory. The Council of Neutral Worlds had voted unanimously to condemn the New Geneva massacre. Their statement called it an act of barbarism unworthy of any civilized species and demanded immediate reparations. 3 member worlds had already expelled Velthrix diplomats. And perhaps most troubling of all, the merchant guilds had begun canceling contracts. The guilds cared nothing for politics or morality. They cared only for profit. If they were abandoning the hegemony, it meant they believed the humans might actually win. How is this possible? Hierarch Threxus raged. We are the Velthrix. We have crushed empires. We have burned worlds. How can one insignificant species turn the entire galaxy against us? Because they do not fear us anymore, Korvax said quietly. The other hierarchs turned to look at him. For 10,000 years, Korvax continued, our power has rested on 2 foundations, our military strength and the fear that strength inspires. Every species in the galaxy has seen what happens to those who defy us. They have watched us destroy civilizations, enslave populations, and erase entire cultures from existence. And because of that fear, they have tolerated us. They have traded with us, negotiated with us, pretended to respect us, all because they were afraid of becoming our next victims. He stood and walked to the trophy wall, studying the relics of conquered peoples. But fear is a fragile thing. It only works as long as no one is willing to stand up. The moment someone does, the moment someone looks at the Velthrix and says, we are not afraid, the illusion begins to crack. The humans, Sithax said, understanding dawning in his eyes. They are not just fighting us. They are showing the galaxy that it is possible to fight us. Exactly. Korvax turned back to face the conclave. The human woman said something that I did not fully appreciate at the time. She said they had been watching us, studying us, preparing for us. They knew we would eventually attack them, so they built their entire strategy around that certainty. He began to pace, his mind racing. Think about it. They did not try to match our strength. They knew they could not. Instead, they developed weapons we cannot find, alliances we did not expect, and a diplomatic campaign that has already done more damage to our empire than any fleet could. Then we destroy them, Threxus said. We launch everything we have at their worlds. We burn their colonies and their home planet. We make an example that no species will ever forget. And if their hidden weapons are real? Thrakos asked. If we send our fleets into human space and they are ambushed, if we lose half our military strength fighting an enemy we cannot even see, what happens then? The question hung in the air. The Luminari are already mobilizing, Sithax pointed out. The Cathari have broken their treaties. If we suffer a serious defeat against the humans, how long before our other enemies decide to take advantage? How long before the species we have conquered see an opportunity for rebellion? Korvax returned to his throne and sat heavily. For the first time in 2,000 years, he felt old. Not just ancient, but tired of war, tired of conquest, tired of the endless cycle of violence that had defined his existence. What do you propose? He asked. Surely you are not suggesting we accept the human demands? Of course not, Thrakos said. But perhaps we should not reject them immediately either. The human woman gave us 30 days. We can use that time to search for their weapons, to reinforce our defenses, to repair our diplomatic position. If we find proof that the humans are bluffing, we destroy them. If we find that they are telling the truth, we negotiate, Sithax finished. We find a way to end this conflict that preserves our power and our reputation. Korvax considered this for a long moment. Everything in his nature screamed for immediate retaliation. The Velthrix did not negotiate with inferiors. They did not compromise. They conquered or they destroyed. But the human woman's calm confidence haunted him. She had walked into the Chamber of Conquerors and faced 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy without a trace of fear. Either she was the greatest bluffer in history, or she knew something he did not. Very well, he said at last. We wait, we search, and we prepare for whatever comes next. But deep in his ancient heart, Korvax had a terrible feeling that the galaxy had already changed, and that the Velthrix would never be the same again. The 30 days passed, and the Velthrix did not withdraw. Their scouts searched human space desperately, looking for the hidden weapons that Ambassador Vasquez had revealed. They found a few hundred platforms hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems. But the more they found, the more they realized how much they had missed. For every weapon they destroyed, 10 more seemed to appear. It was like trying to empty an ocean with a cup. And so, when the deadline expired, the Velthrix hegemony braced for war. But the war that came was nothing like what they expected. There were no massive fleet battles, no glorious confrontations between armadas. The humans did not send waves of ships to crash against Velthrix defenses. Instead, they fought a different kind of war, a war of shadows, precision, and patience. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. Ammunition ships exploded before they could reach the front lines. Communication satellites went dark, leaving entire fleets unable to coordinate. Military bases found their power systems sabotaged, their weapons disabled, their sensors blinded. The Velthrix could not find an enemy to fight. Human strike teams appeared from nowhere, accomplished their objectives, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. It was as if the humans knew exactly where to strike and exactly when to strike, as if they could see everything the Velthrix were doing. And perhaps they could. For 200 years, while the Velthrix had dismissed them as primitives, the humans had been planting intelligence assets throughout the hegemony. Spies in government offices, listening devices in military command centers, observation satellites so small they were invisible to standard sensors. The humans had built a network of information gathering that penetrated every level of Velthrix society. Within 3 months, the hegemony had lost control of its outer systems. Not through destruction. The humans rarely killed unless they had no choice. Instead, they cut the lines that connected those systems to the central government. They disabled the military garrisons, freed the slave populations, and helped local resistance movements take control. World after world declared independence from the hegemony. Species that had been conquered centuries ago suddenly found themselves free for the first time in generations. They did not trust the humans. Why would they trust any species after what the Valfrics had done? But they accepted human help, human weapons, and human advisors who taught them how to defend themselves. By the 6th month, the Valfrics' hegemony had shrunk from 12 systems to 5. Their military was in chaos, unable to fight an enemy they could barely see. Their economy was collapsing as trade routes were severed and resources dried up. And their population was beginning to question whether the war could be won at all. Supreme Hierarch Korvax watched his empire crumble and felt something he had never experienced before: despair. He had ruled for 2,000 years through strength and fear. He had crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and destroyed anyone who dared to challenge him. But none of his experience had prepared him for an enemy like humanity. The humans did not fight for territory or resources. They did not want to conquer the Valfrics or enslave them. They wanted something far more dangerous. They wanted to change the galaxy. They wanted to prove that the old way, the way of empires and conquest and fear, was no longer the only option. And they were succeeding. On the anniversary of the New Geneva massacre, Korvax finally accepted the truth. The war was lost. The Valfrics could continue fighting, could burn worlds, and sacrifice millions of soldiers, but they could not win. The humans were too patient, too clever, too determined. And every day the war continued, more of the galaxy turned against the hegemony. He sent a message to the Human Confederacy requesting peace talks. Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to Threxus Prime 1 year after her first visit. But the capital she walked through was a different place. The streets that had once been filled with triumphant monuments were now quiet and subdued. The statues of great conquerors had been torn down by protesters. The mood was not defeat exactly, but a kind of exhausted acceptance. The Chamber of Conquerors had been renamed the Hall of Memory. The trophy walls were empty. Every artifact had been removed and returned to the species from which it had been stolen. Where thousands of relics had once proclaimed Valthric supremacy, there was now only bare stone and silence. Korvax sat alone on his throne. The other hierarchs had fled, been arrested, or been overthrown by their own people. He was the last of the old order, a relic of an age that was ending. Elena walked across the vast floor and stopped before him. She looked exactly as she had a year ago, calm, composed, patient. Only her eyes were different. There was a weariness in them now, a weight that had not been there before. She had seen things in the past year that no one should have to see. But she had also seen hope. "Supreme Hierarch," she said, "I am here to accept your surrender." Korvax studied her for a long moment. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You could have destroyed us. You had the power to burn our worlds, enslave our people, do to us everything we did to others. Why show mercy?" Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Because we are not you," she said at last. "We did not fight this war to become conquerors. We fought it to protect our people and to create a galaxy where conquest is no longer the only option. Destroying you would have made us no better than you. It would have proven that violence is the only answer." She walked to one of the empty trophy walls and ran her hand across the bare stone. "When my sister died at New Geneva, I wanted revenge. I wanted to make the Valthrics suffer the way they had made us suffer. But revenge is empty. It does not bring back the dead. It does not heal the wounds. It only creates more pain, more hatred, more war." She turned back to face Korvax. "Humanity chose a different path. We chose to fight for justice, not vengeance. We chose to free the oppressed, not to become oppressors ourselves. We chose to prove that a better way is possible. And what becomes of the Velthrix now? Korvax asked. That is up to you, Elena replied. The hegemony is finished, that much is certain. But the Velthrix species will survive. You will join the community of galactic civilizations as equals, not as conquerors. You will learn to trade instead of steal, to negotiate instead of threaten, to cooperate instead of dominate. It will not be easy, Korvax said. My people have lived as warriors for 10,000 years. We do not know any other way. Then you will learn, Elena said. Just as humanity learned. We were once a species of warriors too. We fought endless wars among ourselves, killed millions of our own kind, came close to destroying our civilization more than once. But we found another path. We learned that cooperation is stronger than conflict, that building is more satisfying than destroying, that the greatest victories are the ones where no one has to die. She reached into her pocket and produced a small object, a piece of twisted metal, scorched and melted. This is from New Geneva. It was part of a playground where children used to laugh and play. I have carried it with me every day since the massacre. She placed it on the arm of Korvax's throne. This is a reminder of what hatred and arrogance can cost. 43,000 people died because your empire saw them as nothing more than targets. Remember them. Remember what you did. And let that memory guide you toward a better future. Korvax picked up the piece of metal and held it in his massive claw. It was so small, so insignificant, and yet it represented everything he had done wrong. I will remember, he said quietly. Elena nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back. One more thing, Supreme Hierarch. The next species you think about testing weapons on, the next civilization you consider conquering, the next people you want to dismiss as primitives, remember how this war ended. Remember that strength is not always measured in ships and soldiers. And remember that the smallest voice can change the galaxy if it has the courage to speak. She walked out into the sunlight of a changed universe. Behind her, the last ruler of the Velthrix hegemony sat alone with a piece of melted metal in his hand, and the weight of 10,000 years of conquest on his shoulders. The war was over. Humanity had not won through superior firepower or greater numbers. They had won through patience, preparation, courage, and most importantly, mercy. They had shown the galaxy that there was another way, that even the mightiest empires could be brought low by those who refused to give up hope. In the years that followed, the story of the human Velthrix War spread across the stars. Species that had lived in fear began to stand up for themselves. Civilizations that had accepted oppression started demanding freedom. And everywhere, the message was the same. If the humans could face the Velthrix and win, then anything was possible. Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to Earth and retired to a small house near the ocean. She planted a garden, read books, and watched the sun set over the water each evening. Sometimes she thought about her sister, about New Geneva, about everything she had lost and everything she had gained. She had not brought the dead back. No victory could do that. But she had created a galaxy where their deaths meant something, where their memory would inspire others to build rather than destroy, to hope rather than fear. And in the end, that was enough. Far away, among the stars, children of 100 different species grew up in a universe.